Once you do this, the very first thing I do is use, of course, the healing brush and go over the entire image, getting rid of all the imperfections like pimples and scars and such, like things like that. The important thing to note when we are working with the healing brush is make sure your brush size is small. You do not want to have a really large brush where you're covering a huge area, because you're not going to make it look realistic, because there is quite a number, the skin texture changes significantly, and there's a lot of change within that circle. So when you sample from that large an area and place it somewhere else, it's not going to look believable, and you're actually going to be able to see that circle because the skin texture is completely different, and it's slanting in a different way and is a different size and density than this original, than this area right here. So that's not what we want to do. What we'd rather do is make the size of your brush slightly larger than the size of the imperfection that you're trying to cover, and it'll make for much more realistic and much more precise adjustment. So basically, and I like to sample in the same area or very near the area that I would want to fix, without making it look obviously cloned or duplicated, because the texture, if you sample from somewhere else, changes significantly and it's not going to be a very good fit. So I'll sample from here and then change that over here, and sometimes you get a little bit of an edge, and in those occasions you want to just kind of break that up a little bit by sampling at a few different spots and getting rid of a pattern. And I'm quickly going to move over these different imperfections and sample away. This is probably the most time-consuming part of the retouching job, is the healing, because I like to do it on a really close scale, right on the skin itself, so that way no texture is removed. Because if you do it further away, you're going to start removing texture or contaminating certain areas with other texture that doesn't belong in that area. So I like to fix it. And this girl has pretty much flawless skin, and if you look at anybody's skin this close up, you'll always find imperfections. We're humans after all, and we have imperfections. So let's go over this a little bit more, and you may want to skip this forward, and I'll actually probably end up doing that myself, just so that way you guys don't have to watch for half an hour or an hour, however long it's going to take me to do this. And I just kind of move around the image and heal away these different portions that I feel are imperfections. And of course, this is to taste. You can leave some things in. I tend to like to leave everything, basically get rid of everything, as I like the image to look as flawless as possible, since we are already working with a realistic version, but a perfect human, which is unrealistic in itself, because there's no such thing. We're all imperfect. Okay, so, and sometimes if you sample from an area that you don't feel fits there perfectly, you can either go back a state in the history, or clone over it in hopes that the clone will fix that. Okay, so let's do this a little bit more. And occasionally I'd like to Control minus and back off of the image a little bit, and then you click the original on and off, just so that way I can get a feel for where we've come so far and what areas I still need to work on. And since the image is so large, it's kind of, and I always pretty much work on 100%, because this is where all the texture is. And when you're too far away from the image, you're not going to be able to see all these little things that you're going to be able to see when you're up close and personal to the skin. So there's this pierced ear that I want to fix. And as you can see, that sometimes it leaves a line, and then there's not much texture on the ear, so it doesn't matter that much that I'm going over that area. Okay, so that's basically how it's done. Just going over all these little imperfections, trying to make the skin look as smooth as possible without removing, or with removing the least amount of texture, because texture is good. Unlike those other methods of retouching, which basically is blurring the entire skin over, I'd rather leave this information in, because this is what makes us human. We got skin texture. And somebody that doesn't have skin texture looks like plastic. Doesn't look real. So we definitely want to leave this texture in. And as you can probably see, I'm working really close and personal on these things. And sometimes pulling away is helpful to see how it's progressing overall. Okay, so remember there was a pretty large scar on the hand here. So let's make this bigger. That did a good job, except for this vein here. Alright, so that took care of that little scar. Let's get back on the face. Like I said, this girl's got pretty much flawless skin, so there isn't much healing that we're doing. You know, on some people I would spend a few hours just retouching or just healing away all the different areas of the skin, making it look smoother, basically reconstructing the skin texture so it looks more flawless and more consistent and seamless. Okay, oops, that was, as you can see right here, what I've just done is totally altered the texture, and you can totally see it as a fake. So I'm gonna undo that, make my brush size smaller, and continue on, because for some reason this chin area has got a lot of different lines that are going in whichever way, so it becomes a little more difficult to produce a believable result. And if we were to do this with the clone tool, it would just be a nightmare. I mean, you would literally be spending 10 times more time, because every click that you make, you then have to go back in and adjust the brightness and color and all that, and all of that information, because they're all are going to be slightly different, since it's going to be taken from a different area. And since the healing brush takes that into account and changes your sample before placing it, so that way it matches better with the area that you're placing it. Okay. Okay, it looks pretty good already. There are a few little tiny things that I want to take care of, but let's back off a little bit. And now you're probably starting to see a beautiful image. Okay, let's go back to the original. We've got a few imperfections here and there, as well as that brightness adjustment that we've made. Alright, I think I'd want to get rid of this scar, or this little wrinkle. It's not a scar. Okay, let me make this brush size smaller. Being further away kind of sometimes helps in seeing the variations in brightness of the image, but it makes it a little bit harder to gauge the texture of the skin. So I'm going to go over this area a little bit from further away to smooth out this particular area. Go back in on it. Okay, it looks good. Okay, this little area right here is a little brighter, so I'm just going to quickly clone it in, or heal it in. And that's pretty much all we need to do on her right now. I may do a few more adjustments a little bit later. Let's work on her arms a little bit. They look really nice and clean, so there isn't really much for me to do. Okay, let's get rid of this little scar. this little area right here. I'll go ahead and leave this freckle in. And this one I'll get rid of. There's like a, looks like a little hair. So this is where it gets a little tougher, because the healing brush, like I said in the previous mini tutorial, since we have a transition here, if I just heal away like this, it'll create a problem at the edge. So what I'd rather do is sample right on the edge of this hand, like that. Oops. Once we do that, then I can go ahead and continue on like that, and that pretty much takes care of that problem. Let's go ahead and get a little bit further away so we can see a little bit. Oh, that's definitely not the right texture. Okay, there we go. Alright.